to our viewing audience. I will now call the June 2nd work session of the Lane Community College Board of Education to order. In recognition of Governor Kate Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives executive order to combat the spread of COVID-19, this meeting is still being held remotely. I'd like to remind board members and staff to keep themselves muted and to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to speak. Board members are also asked to have their video turned on if possible, so you are visible to the viewing public. And please don't use the chat. We only use that to communicate with the tech folks. So Donna, could you go ahead and take the roll, please?
Sure. Holly Johnson.
Here.
Angela Van Gross.
Present.
Mike Eister.
Here.
Matt Keating.
Here.
Chelsea Jennings.
Here.
Rosie Pryor.
Here.
Lisa Fragala.
Here. Thank you. So we will start this evening's work session with a land recognition, and Matt Keating, board member Matt Keating, is going to read that for us tonight.
Thank you, Chair Fragala. We begin our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homeland of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this very land for more than 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted and destroyed. We start our work session tonight with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya.
Thank you for reading that, Matt, and for us taking the time to recognize that. We're going to go ahead and go to our first discussion item, which is our safe reopening COVID update. And Provost Jarrell has that
thank
update.
you.
I'm getting it.
It takes time. You just had the emphasis on the wrong syllable. That's okay. I appreciate the opportunity to get to chat with you all today. As you can see from the report, there have been no changes to our institutional reopening safely plan since our last board meeting. I have listed the department reopening plans that have been reviewed and approved by both the reopening advisory team and cabinet since we've met last. We did also review a few more proposals yesterday, and those are now under review by cabinet. I am here to answer any questions you might have or address anything that you might want some more information on.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Paul from board members? Okay, I'm not. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Great, thanks. Paul, I'm sorry, I'm having computer issues, so forgive me if it's in the document. But our foundation partners had sent us communication about possibly underwriting some semblance of an incentive or asking for us to embrace a vaccine verification. Even the Eugene Emeralds today announced that they're going to have vaccinated only sections, and I applaud that, and I applaud the university's approach. How does the ever-changing landscape of COVID and the push to have as much of our community vaccinated as possible weave into this, into your thoughts, into potentially reshaping the reopening plan?
Well, to date, I mean, obviously, as you're aware, Lane doesn't have a vaccination requirement for either employees or students. I will tell you that over the past few days, there was some questions going around on the listserv of my counterparts in the state, and to my knowledge, to date, no community college in Oregon has indicated any kind of vaccination mandate for either employees or students. So we're still on the wait and listen and learn kind of path, I believe, and waiting for a little bit more direction. We haven't gotten any more firm guidance from either HEC or OHA regarding any changes to the way we've been operating. We do anticipate some changes coming from them that lessen up some of their restrictions and requirements of us, but we have yet to see anything to date. I am not aware of any activity from the foundation. I haven't been contacted by them or talked with them about any kind of ideas that they may have in support of vaccination only areas or activities that I'm aware of. So I haven't been approached by them.
Dr. Hamilton? You want to mute yourself?
Matt is absolutely correct. The foundation has come forward and offered to help us with the incentives. What we're doing is Zach is doing the math though. So we're looking at with the HERF money, how much would be allotted to every student? How could the incentive be balanced with it? So I think over the next few weeks, we will be able to roll that out because that'll be good for enrollment, by the way, as we all know. So we all agreed, start with as many positive things as you can. The incentives will be positive. And then hopefully by the time, board's ready to take a vote, we'll have a sense of what's going on. I'm really hopeful within the next few weeks, we'll hear that the executive order has been removed and that there's FDA approval, because that will kind of shape everybody's lens as we walk into this final discussion.
You, Marge. Are there any other questions from board members? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move us on to the board policies.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you, Paul. Move us on to the board policies part of our agenda. Michael Blade, did you want to give us an overview?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Fragala. So I think everyone will recognize these policies. We've talked about them in the past. They're not new. They're just in a new form. And so there's two that are before you today or tonight. One of them is the BP 2431 selection of the president, and the other is the BP 2610 presentation of initial collective bargaining proposals. I'll go through the selection of the president one first. I don't know if everybody knows. So for those of you who don't know, Trustee Van Kraus wanted some diversity language for selecting a president included with the very short OCCA policy. What I did with, you'll see it's quite a bit of an addition. And what I thought was it would be easier for you all to look at a lot of information and take out what you didn't want rather than looking at just a little addition and try to add in. So to the extent that, this is too much, feel free to, take out what you don't think needs to be there. But what I tried to do is add in some statements saying that not only is Lane looking for a diverse pool, they are committed, the board is committed to finding a diverse pool anytime they select a president.
Okay, so let's start with BP 2431. Angela?
Thank you. And thank you, Michael, for preparing the language. I definitely appreciate the sort of direction that it's going. I think that I was looking for something a little bit more concrete. And so sort of to that end, I've drafted something and collaborated a bit with our colleague, Chelsea Jennings, to prepare something that I'm hoping we could discuss, maybe a slightly different take on it. I know we don't usually use the chat for sharing information, but given that it's a part of the public record and I have some language drafted.
We could let you screen share.
Ooh, isn't that fancy? Sure.
Okay. Let's see. It doesn't look like I can do that. With the Randy, are you still here? Great, thank you.
Okay. So as you can see, this sort of proposal is much shorter. So I'll just read the adjustment. So it starts out with the exact language of the 2431 original from OCCA. And then goes on to say, the board shall receive a training from an expert in the field on best hiring practices with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion before establishing the search process. The board will apply those best practices in hiring to recruit a diverse candidate pool and ensure that the process does not exclude or discourage qualified diverse candidates. So I think that my goals with this additional language were really to offer something that's a bit more concrete, something that we can actually sort of put in place that could in fact change the way that we approach the process. And I think that one thing that I was thinking about as I was reading the policy and sort of thinking about the policy was, you know, our former colleague Melanie had really significant experience in this arena. And when she had talked about her experience and the work that she was doing in this space, I felt like I really couldn't relate because I didn't have any similar experience. And so I think from my perspective, it would be helpful if the entire board had sort of a base level training before we started a process. And in that way, we can ensure that we're all on some level on the same sort of starting point. But I've been going on for a while, so I'll pause. Thank you.
Hey, I have Mike in the queue.
I have 2 points. One is I assume that our HR department conducts training for staff who are in charge or overseeing selection processes. And if the board is overseeing a selection process, I would assume that we would get very similar training, either from our HR department or from a consultant that they would recommend. The other point that I raise is, I'm sorry, could you pop the wording back up there, Randy, or whoever had it up there? Is to eliminate one of the 2 words at the end, either qualified or diverse. We don't want to discourage qualified candidates, but it seems almost demeaning to say we only want qualified diverse candidates if we don't say we only want qualified all candidates. So my inclination would be to either eliminate the word qualified or eliminate the word diverse.
Chelsea?
Thank you. I don't necessarily have a comment regarding what my colleague Mike had to say, but just generally want to say that I'm really in support of, generally speaking, the language that Angela has crafted. I think that it's really important that, especially for a policy like this one, that there is something very actionable within it that guarantees that no matter what the makeup of the board is moving forward, that there is an understanding that when you know, a vacancy needs to be filled, that whatever the makeup of the board is at the time is getting this sort of training. Everyone's coming in with a base level understanding. And I think that it helps put some action behind what I know is important to all the colleagues here and to everyone, which is actually putting some actionable items behind our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think that the language as it is fine. But I'm of course willing to hear out any edits like Mike has suggested.
I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to put myself in the queue. So I fully support the addition of some references to ensuring that we're thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion in the selection of the president. I do have some concerns about some of this language, though. The first sentence doesn't seem like a policy, so a language you would see in a policy. It seems much more implementation oriented. And I'm particularly concerned about the phrase "before establishing the search process," because I feel like that a training could have the need to schedule training could hinder the establishment of a search process. I fully support the training being given to the board, especially non-biased training given to the board or for anybody that would participate in the selection process. But I wouldn't want it to have to be done before establishing a search process. The search process is something I think that would be a very broad timeline. And I think it's a level of detail that is too explicit to have to be had in a policy. So I would be fine with leaving the training piece in, but I would like to see before establishing the search process taken out, and would be supportive of ensuring that, you know, any type of non-biased training would occur before the interview process. I see, Holly, did you take your hand down? Did you want to go next? Okay, Matt.
Thanks, Chair. It would be very helpful to see both proposals in front of us. We're giving a lot of time to Angela's, and this is the first time I'm seeing it. And comparing the two, I think, would be helpful. Thank you. And I would just ask in the future. Well, I've got, this is my last work session, so what am I saying? But I think colleagues could benefit from seeing these ahead of time, since we had so much time with the recommendation from legal counsel, and just kind of compare notes in our head or among ourselves. I do appreciate the scaling down and essentially summarizing in that second paragraph the three paragraphs in the legal counsel's suggestion, because it's about the filling the position of the president and not necessarily about the college's diversity as a whole. So I appreciate that. Like Chair Fragula mentioned, I think that the language around putting a time frame before the establishing the search process could tie the hands of a future board. And so I would want some semblance of wordsmithing around before the search process. I don't necessarily know if I agree with omitting both discouraged and qualified, or I'm sorry, both qualified and diverse candidates from the last sentence. But I don't know if this is, you know, the time to offer a friendly amendment, or we're going to be voting on this at our next meeting. I would ask colleagues to consider language inserting the words participate in instead of receive a training. If indeed, I'm looking at the Angela's suggestion right now. In Angela's second paragraph, first sentence, it says the board shall receive a training from an expert in the field. And God forbid we have a future board where there might be one or two board members who just aren't participating in the process the way that we would like them to be. This tells me that board member could just simply receive the training. Maybe they receive it via email. Who knows if they watch it? But if the board is encouraged to participate in a training, that might be an entirely different ball of wax. So those are that's my 2 cents. But all in all, Angela, I really appreciate scaling down or summarizing, and just in the future, I think that we could benefit from seeing it ahead of time. Thanks.
Rosie?
Thank you. I would like to suggest, based on the variety of comments that I've heard this evening, that the board isn't really ready to adopt a policy tonight. I think the chair and the vice chair could work offline with trustee Van Kraus and wordsmith this a little bit to reflect the input that we've heard tonight. I agree with the editing recommendation that Mike has made, and I agree with the editing recommendation about the timeline on receiving. And I also agree with the suggestion that the board shall receive a training is really operational language and not policy language in there, that there would be a way to craft that sentence in a sort of a policy establishing format that would make the point that Angela is wanting to make, which I fully support. But has to do with ensuring that any search practices are based on state-of-the-art hiring practices with a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, et cetera. I think we could wordsmith this further, and I think Angela's gotten us off to a great start. I like the fact that it's short, to the point, and has the potential to establish a policy that I think is enduring and appropriate.
Holly?
Thank you. I have to agree with Rosie and thank Angela for recrafting board policy 2431. And while I think it's short and to the point, I think the word diversity is just overused. I mean, it's over and over and over. I have to agree with my fellow board members about the word receiving training and participating. So I do agree with that. I also have to agree that I think we're just not quite there yet. But Angela got us off to a great start, and that we can really work on this. Short and sweet. But Mike made a really good point that I think we should think about. But yeah, I just want to agree with Rosie. I think we're not quite there yet, but we're off to a really good start. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further comments? And Angela?
Thank you all for the feedback. I think there are some really helpful comments. I've taken some notes, and I'll follow up with Lisa and with Rosie and see if we can get something put together that might work out.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate the intent. Holly? Okay, I'm gonna put your hand down. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to BP 2610, presentation of initial collective bargaining proposals. Michael Blake?
Okay, so I would preface these comments by saying I talked to Karen Smith, the OCCA attorney, about this particular board policy, and she indicated that it is not a requirement in Oregon, that we could not have this at all. So that's certainly on the table if you all decide you just want to get rid of it altogether. What she did do is point me to Clatsop Community College, which this particular, the new version with the new language is literally pulled directly from Clatsop, and they sort of added this language to make it, to refer to Oregon law and to make it more in line with what Oregon does. So I basically just said, well, okay, great. I'm gonna crib it from Clatsop and see if you all like it or don't like it. Again, if you don't like it and don't want it, we can get rid of it altogether. But if you like the way it is here or some version of this, I think it makes a little bit more sense with the new language.
Okay, Rosie, followed by Angela.
Thank you. I suggest that we don't need this policy. I've served on the board for 10 years and there has never been a time when the president has not kept the board fully informed of the status of labor negotiations, consistently informed and in the loop, and positioned the board to establish the parameters and so forth. I think if there'd been any sort of problem with this, perhaps the policy might be in order. We don't have a problem. If the board feels like it's useful to have a couple of sentences in our operational guidelines that just enable a succeeding chairperson who isn't part of tonight's conversation to know that this is an expectation to have of the president, or for the benefit of some other administrations over history, then perhaps we might put something in our operational guidelines, but I don't think we need this policy.
Angela?
Well, I'm not sure if I want to make my comments because I think I just agree with Rosie. But if I were going to simply make the comments that I had intended, I would say that the first sentence of the last paragraph I find confusing. I had thought that we had concluded in a previous meeting when we were discussing initial proposals for collective bargaining that there were legal requirements in California for the president to present those to the board, but there were not legal requirements in Oregon for that. And so directing the president to comply with any legal requirements when none exist is confusing to me. I also don't love listing out all of the various ORSs. I think, you know, we can certainly find that information when it's needed. Folks who are sort of involved deeply in that work are certainly already familiar with them. And I feel like it's unnecessarily cluttered. But I think I might just agree with Rosie. Thanks.
So could I just ask for a clarification? Did you say you agree with Rosie or disagree with her about it being necessary?
Agree. I'm not
Agree.
I'm not
Okay,
clear
thank you.
that it
Thanks for that clarification. Just the sound got a little warbled on my end. Mike?
In my public board experience, CEOs have always done this, and I'm not aware that it was ever directed by the board to do it. I think it just goes with the territory if you're a CEO. So I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. Anyone else? I would also like to say that considering that it's not applicable in the state of Oregon, that I think this board policy is also unnecessary. And I'd love to hear if anyone else has any thoughts on it. And we might consider that we don't need to move it forward to the next board meeting. Chelsea?
Thank you. Yeah, I think I agree as well, given that it's not a legal requirement here in the state of Oregon, but I really like, I believe it was Rosie's suggestion around putting something in our operational agreements. I think that could be really helpful to future boards. I think that would be a good idea to help cement that value somewhere.
Great, thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I don't think it's needed, and I concur. Putting language in the operating agreement would be welcome. While we're doing that, we may, for the sake of some of our newer members, want to also illustrate or underscore that our role is not necessarily in the bargaining at the bargaining table. That's ultimately the fiduciary responsibility and authority lies with us, but that's not our role. I've been asked or invited to participate in bargaining early on in my career at Lane. I didn't, and we may just want to include language that references that point in an operating agreement, but it's not, doesn't need to be codified by board policy.
Thanks, Matt. Anyone else? Okay, so it seems like it's the will of the board that we will not be moving this forward. And thanks for doing that follow-up work on it, Mike.
Yep. No problem. And just to clarify, you all are going to work on the selection of the president language. And if you
Yes.
need me, I'm happy to help. So just,
Great.
send me an email or call.
Thank you.
All
Yeah, Angela is gonna follow up with Rosie and I, and I'm sure you'll hear from us. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to move us on to our next discussion item, which is the board self-assessment. And so I believe all board members should have received that, the outcome of the survey, that data. And I wanted to just give us an opportunity to think about that a little bit, and to provide a little bit of a frame. I'd like for us to think about, start off with what are some of the things that we think has gone well as a board in this last year, or even recently, or whatever pops to mind. And then considering that we are thinking about ideas tonight, that we are going to move on to the board retreat in July for the new board to consider for goals for the coming year. I'd like for people to consider, what recommendations would you have to the next board? We could imagine, we're the ancestors, the good ancestors of this next board, even though some of us will be participating in it. So what recommendations do we have for this next board to improve upon and to grow? So let's go ahead and start with some of the things that we thought has gone well, or any accomplishments or things that we may have been successful at as a board in this last year. And you do have the rubric. Please feel free to address items related to that, or any other topic. Mike?
It seems to me that the board has gotten better over, I'd say, the last 2 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, at sort of monitoring our individual input to make sure that there's airtime for other people. And I think that's a real plus, and a real sign of respect, mutual respect by board members. And I think we still can do better at that, but I've seen significant improvement and wanted to note that. Yeah, maybe that's all I'll say for right now.
Okay, thank you. Rosie?
Thank you. I would love to be the one to say that we passed a bond measure. That certainly went well. But what I think is the part of that went well is that this Board of Education organized itself almost instantaneously with tremendous respect for the varying expertise of differing board members into a high-functioning bond campaign team. And I think we should really celebrate that. It's not always the case, when there's pressure to deliver a big outcome. Sometimes people can't organize themselves to truly appreciate and step back and let various persons bring their talents to the party. And I think we did that remarkably well for a very, very young board. If you'll recall, at least a couple of our board members hadn't even been on the board very long when we decided we were going to jump in and go for it. So, I mean, I think that speaks well for the commitment that individual board members are showing for their willingness to stand shoulder to shoulder when it's necessary for Lane.
Thanks, Rosie. Anyone else? Matt?
Thanks. Yeah, I think the bond is one of the biggest highlights. That's for sure. Passing a bond in the midst of a global pandemic by such a significant support rate, staying focused on the budget, and so bond and budget come to mind, and we had great successes with both. So we showed up, we listened, we engaged in community conversations, we navigated high-level transitions on the E-team and getting our presidents back. Those were not easy, I'm sure. And we helped secure vital federal funding and critical state funding, as especially in connection with the American Rescue Plan. And so my fingers are crossed at the end of the day, by the time Sine Die comes around, Community College Support Fund will be funded fairly and adequately at the level that we're asking to maintain services. But budget and bond, battling COVID and reopening safely and putting the safety of our campus community, including students, staff, faculty, administration, board members, and at all, safety was key. So that's a lot in there, but bond, budget, and battling COVID come to mind.
Thanks, Matt. Is there anyone else? Mike, I'm going to go ahead and put myself in the queue and then go to you if that's okay. Great. So I think definitely passing the bond was a big accomplishment. And from, looking at it from the perspective of working together as a board, I mean, this board and many other individuals came together in a tremendous effort. And but Dr. Hamilton and the board and a few others were the core team. And I'm really proud of the work that we all did on that, and agree that we brought varying degrees of expertise, but that there was a tremendous amount of expertise in this group, and it varied, but we were very fortunate to have it. I'd also like to say that I think we've made progress on our policy work, and I know that that's kind of a it's not a sexy topic area, but I feel like when I think back to 2 years ago, where we were spinning out a little bit on reviewing those policies, I think we've made some significant progress. I think we're still working at the kinks, but we're putting a good system in place. Not only reviewing the policies, but looking at the OCCA policies, which I think will enrich our governance structure. So I think that is something that is a positive. And then on another note, I'm also feeling pretty good about beginning to really implement new board member onboarding, and Holly has actually been through module 1 and 2 that Marge and I have worked on together. Donna has been busy scheduling our 2 new board members, Austin and Steve, to have both of those modules done prior to the retreat. And then there's a 3rd module that all 3 of them will go through. So I'm feeling like that's a pretty good accomplishment to have finally had the opportunity and impetus to get to work on that. Go to Mike and then to Holly.
I just wanted to echo some of the previous comments about the bond measure and emphasize that we have board members with incredible expertise, and fortunately, it's not everybody's. Everybody was an expert in the same thing. They were conveniently expert in a variety of things, which allowed us to really be highly effective. And it's one of the aspects of our board that's quite unusual, to have the level of expertise by various individuals that was deployed during the bond campaign. So I just wanted to emphasize and agree with colleagues who had talked about that earlier.
Thank you. Holly. Holly, I can't hear you. You look like you're unmuted, but
I'll just take these off.
okay.
Now,
Yes, I can hear you now.
yeah, thank you. And as the newest member on the board and joining mid-year, I just have to say that whether you've been here for a while on the board or not, or you're fairly new, my experience was very comfortable coming in mid-year. So I want to thank you for that, and to Donna and Lisa and President Hamilton for the training that you provided was awesome. And I've already told you three that I love board docs. And so I don't know what was here before, but it helps me organize and stay organized prior to meetings and during the meetings. So I just wanted to say that the onboarding process for me has been very comfortable, and everybody was very welcoming. So that's my input. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. I'm going to go to Chelsea and then to Matt.
Thank you. I'll echo everything that my colleagues have noted thus far, and emphasize all the things that everyone has said thus far. And then also, in addition to that, I think that something that I know I've been proud to be a part of, and I hope that this is the case for all future boards to come, is I really do believe that this group has a very strong commitment to the Black Lives Matter movement and DEI work. And that's not to say that we are always going to get it right. And that's not to say that we're always, that we're never going to make mistakes. But there is a willingness, I think, here to learn. And I think that there's a willingness here to, always be doing better. And I think that that's hugely important. And I hope that that's something that all future boards moving forward will take with them.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to go to Matt and then Holly and then Mike.
Thanks, Lisa. Specifically, I mentioned battling COVID, but I wanted to call out all the volunteers from the Eugene and Springfield Rotary clubs and the volunteers from the Lane campus community who helped vaccinate 64.1% of Lane County. And those massive vaccination clinics, whether they're at Autzen or Lane County Fairgrounds or Lane Community College, were critical in helping get the vaccine out to putting shots in arms to as many folks as possible. And so to Dawn and the team at LCC, for staff and volunteers who helped execute with aplomb a massive vaccination clinic, deserve huge kudos. It's a great success. I'm glad this board supported that effort. We also supported the foundation's creation of a Black Minds Matter Student Assistance Fund and promoting that throughout the community at a critical time in our nation's history to get, not only did we pass a robust resolution declaring Black Lives Matter, but the creation of a Black Minds Matter Student Assistance Fund is a tremendous win. And I hope that future boards will put even more attention and resources into the Black Minds Matter Student Assistance Fund. And we supported resolutions that supported our lawmakers for crafting and passing law that protected our school and our campus community from the perils of gun violence. And so those are pretty big. And I didn't want my comments to go without recognizing those critical key moments in this last year.
Holly, did you want to go? Okay, Mike?
Yeah, sorry about the free association here. These things just keep popping into my head. I wanted to give Lisa kudos on the operating principles, that they are helpful. I know that it took some time and energy and effort to put together, and it's an organizing principle that I think speaks to your educational background, because you have to organize like that every day. And we were the beneficiaries. The other thing is that Lisa has done a really fine job of balancing airtime of board members with the fact that all of us want the meeting to end as reasonably soon as it can. And that's not an easy balancing act to do. And I think you've done it very well, Lisa. So I just want to comment on that.
Thanks. I will say that the board operating procedures were Melanie Munzer's idea. And I just got the opportunity to flesh them out a little bit. So
Good job.
yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure. All right. So how about we move on to what ideas, what recommendations do we have for this year's coming board? Opportunities for growth, opportunities to have vision for the college, opportunities to do better. Mike.
So one of the themes that I thought I saw for potential improvement was the issue of the board dipping into management. And so I mean, the obvious thing that pops into my head, and it may not be the best approach, but maybe some training that would include examples and just maybe some training that includes examples might be helpful.
Great. Yeah, I had noticed that also. Matt?
I would offer communication as something to think about in an era in which more folks are going to be vaccinated and restrictions are going to be lowered and more folks are going to be out and about. We might want to think about not only how we get back into the community safely, but also how we retain this distance digital aspect, which has provided an accessible platform for folks all around our county to be able to participate in our work sessions and in our meetings and balance life and work and not have to go to the community college on the 1st or 3rd or whatever Wednesdays we're meeting. They can watch online and it lives in perpetuity, so they can watch whenever they want, but they can participate telephonically and remotely. And yet we can still go back to that, whatever semblance of normality that is, where we're interacting personally. I just don't want us to lose. I don't want a future board to lose the connectivity we've seen in the virtual digital space.
Thanks, Matt. Mike?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's an old hand, but I do have another comment.
Okay.
Yeah, I was noticing that there's quite a spread on some of our numerical scores. And this might be a better conversation for executive session if it qualifies, but I don't want to put any specific board member on the spot, but I'm curious about the extreme ratings we had in some of our areas, and maybe a more candid conversation might yield some information that would help us figure out where we need to work a little harder.
Okay. I think for tonight, we're gonna really focus on some kind of recommendations for how we can do better and improve. And maybe we can think about that more type of candid conversation in a different venue than in the Zoom room. Unless somebody wants to offer that. Rosie?
Thank you. I like the comments that someone made about the board benefiting from in-person contact. And I think we should have as a goal going forward to restore face-to-face meeting times as readily as everyone is comfortable doing that. I'm really grateful that board members are willing to do a post-retreat July face-to-face social gathering. I have always believed that people who know each other, trust each other, and people who trust each other work well together. And so, there's also this wonderful old adage in facilitation that if you change even one person in the group, you have a whole new group. And so we really do have to start all over to do our storming and norming. And the sooner we do that, the more effective we'll be. So I really hope we can fashion a recommendation out of perhaps accelerating some potential social times as well as face-to-face board meeting times so that we can all get better acquainted even more quickly.
Great. Yeah, I noticed that as well. It's somebody that's a great suggestion, and you stated it as a good goal. Is there anyone else? Some visioning for ourselves as ancestors to the next board? Thoughts, wonderings? Matt?
Go to trainings. And I think a good many here have. The OCCA trainings, the NLS, and the ACCT trainings have all greatly benefited me in this institution. So the more you can go to or participate in remotely, the better.
Okay, thanks for taking that hand down. Not seeing any other hands. And so I do recognize that typically, this process is a little bit different when we are together. And I think some board members have spoken to the desire to want to have more in-person contact and building those relationships. And I definitely agree with that. And so I also encourage anybody who, wants to reach out and check in about anything. That's also an option. Love having those one-to-one conversations. And I think we have a lot of information that we can also take to think about establishing some good goals for next year. Are there any final comments from board members? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Well, thank you all for that. That is our last item for the evening, except for the executive session. So our future meeting dates are, we have our regular board meeting on June 16th. And we, just as a reminder, we don't have a work session in July. We will have the retreat on July 10th, and we will be meeting remotely in Zoom for the actual retreat itself. But as Rosie mentioned, we're hoping to have some type of social luncheon to welcome new board members. Mike?
So if this were a live meeting, I think this would be the part where a cake comes out that says, "Thank you, Matt Keating," and has candles on it. And
oh, we still get Matt for one more meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, we're saving that, Matt.
Thanks, Mike.
We'll do the cake. We'll do the virtual cake twice. So is there anything for the good of the order? Not seeing anything. Board members, you should check your personal email or check your email, whichever one you usually get things from. And Donna will be sending us a link for the executive session. Otherwise, I am adjourning this work session. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
All right.
Happy Pride.
Hi, everybody.